On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks are just 1 week away from opening the 2025-26 season, and it's time for a news catch-up with plenty of notes, topics, etc. It's coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2077 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening here in mid-October. And today's podcast is brought to you by folks at GameTime App. Download the GameTime app right now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify. We are also on YouTube, so please like this video as you are watching it and tell your friends about the podcast. Ratings, reviews, appreciated, all that fun stuff. We appreciate you being here as always. Because of travel and the Hawks playing game on Monday nights, I thought that kind of a general news and topics and notes catch up for about 2 weeks now, and there is a ton to get to because of that. At the end of the podcast, I'll probably answer a direct mailbag question as well. But honestly, a lot of these topics were actually asked about as well in the last couple of days and weeks too. So a wide berth on today's podcast, and we're going to get a bunch of different stuff because, by the way, the Atlanta Hawks play a game in 1 week. I am recording this podcast early on Wednesday evening. It will be posted around the time that tip-off will be in a week. So we are really just almost there. The Hawks play a game tomorrow that does not count, but in 1 week, they play a game that counts, and we're getting very close to a lot of interesting things with the Atlanta Hawks. With that said, as I record this, there's a lot going on outside of the actual game stuff. For example, there are deadlines to watch over the next week that are wide-ranging. The most prominent is probably the Dyson Daniels extension deadline. The Hawks and Dyson have until October 20th, which is Monday, to get a deal done. That's a league-wide deadline for the guys that are entering their fourth seasons that were drafted in the first round. Dyson's one of those. And as a reminder, even if they do not get an extension done, he'll be a restricted free agent next summer. So the Hawks do have that hammer on their side of things, and it's an interesting negotiation. I talked about it a lot over the last couple of weeks. It'll be coming up even more, I promise, in the next 4 or 5 days. But Monday is the day for the Hawks and Dyson to find a deal, if not before then. Also, on that same day, October 20th, which is Monday, the rosters have to be set for NBA opening day by 5 p.m. Eastern time. And that's a reminder that the Hawks have some roster battles still going on. They only have 10 guys on guaranteed contracts, plus they have the Krejci and Moguet, who will be on the team, barring a shock. That's 12, and they have to have at least 14 on the roster, up to 15 if they want to. They have Caleb Houston and Foy Dante and Charles Bassey all on non-guaranteed contracts, plus they have Lamont Butler on Exhibit 10, et cetera, et cetera. They could very reasonably keep all of Houston, Dante, and Bassey if they wanted to, but in talking to people around the league, the Hawks are consistently mentioned as a team that could, I don't want to say will, but could be active in signing someone who's cut somewhere else, for example, if they find someone that they're actually really interested in between now and then. Onsi is, of course, into that big word of optionality, and having a bunch of non-guaranteed contracts means that they could kind of cut anybody they want to and sign somebody they want to, or they can just keep all three. So there's kind of a wide range. I do think that one of at least Dante or Bassey will be on the team. I think Houston, I would project to be on the team right now if I had to guess right now on Wednesday evening, but there is some wiggle room at the end of the roster to be sure, and that deadline of Monday at 5 for the opening day roster is one that's notable. As of this recording also, I mentioned before, Lamont Butler still on an Exhibit 10 contract. I got some questions about him after the way he played on Monday in the preseason game when he was playing a lot of minutes. I would be surprised if he was actually on the NBA roster on Monday, but he's definitely a guy that they like and they targeted in the post-draft process. He was going to play in summer league until he got injured, for example. He's an actual prospect. A lot of guys who are on Exhibit 10s are kind of just like, filtered to the G League. I think Butler was a draftable player in the draft in 2025, for example. You shouldn't ignore him, but I think he probably will be in College Park if I had to guess 1 week from now. Also on the deadline front, the Hawks have until the end of this month to decide on Zachary Richeshay's third-year team option. That's one of those where I would fall on the floor if they did not exercise it. It's kind of a no-brainer to do that for the number one overall pick, who they like a lot, of course. It is real money. It's like $13.8 million for next season. The more interesting one of these, of course, would have been Kobe Buffkin had they not traded him. But with Richeshay, it's kind of a no-brainer, but that's one that they actually have to manually make a choice on between now and the end of this month. Trey Young, of course, does not have a deadline. keep that in mind. I know the extension thing has been out there. It's been a topic, all that stuff. I'm recording this again like early evening on Wednesday. Nothing going on right now that I'm aware of, but he could extend at any moment during the season. Dyson has a deadline on Monday. Trey does not. Trey, there's no hard deadline. It could be in December. It could be in January. It could be never. It could be in March. Whatever you want to say. There's not a deadline there. And that brings us to our first topic beyond the deadlines on this podcast, and that is actually Kristaps Porzingis and his extension. Obviously, a lot of talk about Trey, a lot of talk about Dyson in a different way about extensions. And I've discussed Porzingis and extensions before, but it's been a quieter process. But he gave an interview to Fred Kath of The Athletic earlier this week. And Fred that reported, and I think I've heard the same thing, that no extension is imminent right now between the Hawks and Porzingis. It's not like definitely going to not happen, but it certainly is not something that I'm hearing is going to happen by any means. And Fred passed along a quote from Kristaps, and I want to read to you. Quote, "I know it's an option. I want to see how the year goes. I want to show that I'm playing at a high level again, that I'm healthy, that I'm everything, and then that kind of stuff will take care of itself. We'll see." End quote. Now, it's not surprising to me that a deal is not going to be imminent right now. I've always thought it was unlikely, definitely not going to happen, but unlikely, like less than 50% to actually happen in extension form. On the Hawks side, they got to be mindful of their future salary. Porzingis is the oldest guy on the whole roster right now. He's only 30, so he's not like over the hill, but he's their oldest guy. He doesn't have the equity being here before. He's also accustomed to making a lot of money. And if he was to take a team discount, then sure, but he probably shouldn't and won't do that at this point in time. And the Hawks have to be kind of mindful of a long-term commitment there at a price with what the money they have already out there to other guys. Like Jalen's already paid. You got to pay Zach eventually. Dyson, obviously Trey's situation is still going on out there as well. But on Porzingis' side, he kind of alluded to it in that quote at the same time. Like, it's helpful for his market and his market value to try to stay healthy for a little while. He did tell Fred in the interview that he quote, feels awesome, but there's plenty of incentive for him to prove that he can stay healthy for a season and still be a top 50 kind of player in the league. And if he could do that, he might have a bigger market this summer as a free agent than he would have with just the Hawks negotiating with him. So this is also similar to Trey Young in that there is no deadline. So Porzingis could sign a deal at any point. He's expiring. Trey is not technically expiring, but could be with the player options. So they're in the same spot here. But interesting stuff all the way around. I feel like I've kind of neglected that topic a little bit. I still think I would be mildly surprised if there was a deal done between now and the season starting. But if things are going well during the season, that's when it could happen. And that's kind of where you have that extra flexibility of being able to sign a deal during the year. Trey's is kind of the same thing. Like, suddenly if things are going well, you might want to go ahead and get it done at a relative price that both sides can agree on. Probably that means nobody's like over the moon about it. That's usually a compromise that you kind of have to do at this kind of level, at the top level of basketball and the money that's flying around. But it's a thing to monitor. I still think Trey and Dyson are bigger topics. Trey because he's Trey, and also because just the general max playerness of him. And then Dyson because it's imminent literally in the next few days. But Porzingis is one to keep an eye on. With that said, this is not actually an extension topic, but Porzingis did give a very glowing quote about Trey Young actually last week after a practice that I wanted to pass along, as I was not able to show that until now. But it was kind of goes to show that, like, he's a new guy and he seems to be blown away with Trey. Here's the quote that he gave to they actually gave to the Hawks local media. I was not there, but I've seen the video of this. Quote, "He's a really good communicator, not just on the floor, but off the floor too. He's a cool dude, really genuine. That's just who he is. I can see why he's so good. It makes sense with how he carries himself. Of course, on the court, his playmaking is insane. The moments like, wow, how did he see that? How did he make that happen? It's a privilege to play with him." So, end quote. Obviously, talking about the off court, not just the on court, talking about it being a privilege to play with him. At this point, clearly you don't want to over-index on record quotes. Guys are incentivized to say good things about their teammates for sure. But Trey getting this kind of quote from a new guy is certainly notable. And I've been pushing back on this for a while. The narrative that Trey is like hard to deal with or whatever, I think early in his career was more true. It was not as true as people thought it was back then still. But I think his maturity, this is another guy who has no relationship beyond the last couple of weeks with him, who's like going out of their way to kind of talk about how even off the court, Trey is this guy that he really likes and, all that stuff. So he's not the same guy as used to be. That's important to keep in mind, because every time Trey's decision comes up, some national people characterize him in a way that maybe was more accurate 5-6 years ago than it is now, but it's a different situation. Let's just say that out loud. All right, more to come in a second on the podcast, including the GM survey, the annual GM survey, plus some projections that people are mad about with the Hawks, some player rankings, etc. And it's coming up in just one moment. A lot of people can't name their financial accounts or even what they are worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. If there's not the full picture in your own life, we can leave money on the table. That's not what you want to do, obviously. And that's why there is Monarch Money. It's the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface, either on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people that actually have busy lives like myself. If you've been putting off to organize your finances in the past, Monarch is definitely for you. They do the heavy lifting for you at Monarch Money. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. For me, I linked all my accounts together in Monarch Money and immediately spotted some cancellations potentially that I can actually get rid of costs, and those commitments being off the books for me, saving money each and every month. You can maximize your investments, increase your savings rates, easily review your finances with your financial advisors or with your partner even, and generally keep a clear view of your financial health in the future, both in the short term and in the long term. And you do not want to let a financial opportunity slip through the cracks here. You can use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. And the code when you get there is LOCKEDONNBA. Basketball season is officially here. Nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Ticket buying can be a total headache sometimes. It can be, anyway. Between waiting in queues and surprise fees and prices that jump right before you actually check out, it's easy to get frustrated sometimes when you actually want to just cheer on your team in the building. But that is where GameTime comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage in your actual ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I recently used GameTime myself to actually look for some seats for a family friend of mine, and it could not have been any simpler. I found great seats for them in just minutes. With GameTime, I love actually what you see, what you pay, no hidden fees at checkout. Plus, you can actually see exactly what the view is going to be for your seats before you actually get there, before you buy your tickets, and with your in-app seat view feature. They have these zone deals as well. They're absolutely a game changer. You pick the section, and they pick the seats for you at GameTime. You actually save big money. You can find NBA tickets for as little as $25 or less. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets right now with the folks at GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That is code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All right, so while I was abroad, the annual GM survey came out from John Schumann of NBA.com. John Schumann, by the way, is fantastic. One of the more underrated and I think one of the best basketball writers on the planet. It's NBA.com, so not everybody always goes there, but he is fantastic. Anyway, something that people always pay close attention to around the league. It's a long history. It's been a decade plus of this survey existing. He asks every GM in the league 49 questions, and the only caveat is that they can't vote for their own team or players on their own team. So it's wide-ranging, it's anonymous, and some always interesting answers out there. Obviously, I'll only talk about the Hawks stuff on this podcast, but the Hawks finished fourth in the Eastern Conference rankings of the poll from the GMs, basically. So it's pretty good respect. They got a second place vote, actually, and they got the most fourth place votes of any team in the conference. The overall order was Cleveland number one, then New York, Orlando, Atlanta, Detroit, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and then Boston. The Hawks did soundly win the category of the team that, quote, made the best overall moves this offseason. And they got 53% of the vote for that. That's half the votes or more. That's a pretty impressive number. Houston was next, by the way, and they got Kevin Durant, a inner circle Hall of Famer, on their roster. It goes with the theme that I've been talking about all summer long, honestly. The Hawks have been getting a ton of respect in a way that I am honestly not used to. I know that Hawks fans sometimes have a pretty earned ire for national media sometimes. I think the Hawks, it sometimes goes overblown. That's the nature of being a fan. But the Hawks don't usually get this kind of national buzz in a offseason. They have to kind of earn it. But basically, what they've been getting from the Porzingis deal, the Nickeil Alexander-Walker signing, and of course the home run deal from the Pelicans on draft night, like a lot of respect. This is even more of that. This is not media. This is GMs saying the Hawks are the best overall moves this summer. They finished in a tie also for number two in the team that will be most improved category. Orlando actually won that one, which is interesting to me. But the Hawks finished with 40 wins last year, so it's not like they're starting for total zero. They have to win a lot more to be most improved from 40, but they obviously are much better on paper. The roster clearly improved a ton, and it's notable to me that they were number two in this category, especially because the move that everyone liked the most for them, at least most of everyone, was the Pelicans trade, which has no impact on this at all, because that deal is entirely about the future. This is a most improved roster like for this season, and they were still number two in the league in this voting, despite the fact that deal with New Orleans does nothing for them now. So that kind of tells you how good they were overall. On the player side, a couple of notable things from the Hawks here. Dyson Daniels won the best perimeter defender in the NBA voting with 31% of the vote, ahead of Alex Caruso and Amen Thompson. I'm actually not a total zealot about this. Like, I don't think you have to say Dyson's the best defender in the league on the perimeter. Like, he's one of them for sure. If that's not part of your thinking, then I think you're wrong. But he's very reasonably a choice for it. I know sometimes Hawks fans get mad when it's not Dyson number one on all these lists. Like, if he's number 2 or 3, like, I wouldn't be offended by that. I think it's like pretty reasonable. But him being number 1 is the right choice for me. And I always say this, but his combination of defensive playmaking, which of course is steals, the blocks, etc., that's elite. But also being able to, at the same time, delete other teams' best players, like be the number 1 option on a high-level defender, is very impressive. That combination of being able to create steals and events and also lock down one-on-one is rare, and he can actually do both, which makes him special. Dyson is also, by the way, 4th in the most versatile defender in the NBA category, behind Amen Thompson, Draymond, and Giannis. I don't know if that was necessarily the one I would vote Dyson for. Like, I think he's really good. Versatile, like he is versatile. I wouldn't say like stands out to me as like the super versatile guy, but he certainly can defend in different ways and has what I would always say underrated size and physicality. I think you think about steals and you think about like quick hand, which is certainly true, anticipation, all those things. But Dyson is a legitimate like 6'7", and he's built like a ton of bricks, like super strong guy, and that does lead to some versatility. To the point, Porzingis was number 3 on the most underrated player acquisition voting. I do think that it's not quite talked about enough that Porzingis is on the Hawks now, probably because of his durability concerns, which is reasonable. But as I said before on this podcast, like he's a top 50 guy when he's healthy. Like he's a really, really good player who came at a very cheap price and a low risk contract. Like he also just raises the ceiling for the Hawks so much with his skill set. And very interesting there. Jalen got at least 1 vote for biggest guy to have a breakout season. Wasn't in the top 5, but certainly because he already kind of broke out a little bit last year. Asa Newell got 2 votes for the biggest steal of the draft category. Finished 4th in that one. That's reasonable. Obviously, we'll see later on. Trey was number 3 on the best passer in the league list, behind Jokic and Luka Doncic. By the way, Jokic got 80% of the vote, which is pretty crazy. I get that. He's absolutely absurd. I would have Trey 2nd behind Jokic and probably closer to 1 than 3. I think I'm at least happy that he got some votes. So I think there was a year, maybe his last year, the year before, where he got no votes. And I was like, guys, he's the best passing guard in the league. Like Luka is different. He's bigger. I get that. There is an argument for guys who are bigger. Like some of my favorite passers are the bigger guys, like LeBron, Jokic, guys who can see the floor differently because of their size. Luka's kind of in more of that category. But if you go from a straight passing of a guard who's like normal sized, Trey's number 1 on that list for me. So I was pleased to see him being in that top 3. And for me, again, pretty clearly the best passing guard in the league, if you ask me. The Pels Hawks trade was also number 3 on the most surprising move list, behind the wave and stretch of Damian Lillard, which was a shock when it happened, and then also Miles Turner signed with the Bucks. So lots of Bucks stuff, but the most surprising move nod for the Hawks Pels trade was kind of funny to me. And then Quinn got at least 1 vote for the which coach runs the best offense, but he was not in the top 5 of that voting. He does run great stuff and often gets, I would say, a lot of love from coaches around the league, like the sickos, the scouts, always like what Quinn runs, and I've seen that firsthand. He's not always like renowned for that nationally, but I think if you go around the league, he's respected in that area. So anyway, that's the GM survey. Nothing crazy to me. Like I went 1 by 1 there, but the Hawks being 4th is kind of a consensus projection. Like if you have them 3rd, which I might, by the way, that's reasonable. If they're 5th, I wouldn't. That's crazy. If there were anything below 5th, I'd be kind of eyebrow raised by that. But still, like very reasonable stuff. Some good love for Dyson, good love for Trey in some respects. Jalen, Porzingis, etc. Before we move on to something else on the podcast, a quick look at the SI player rankings. If you missed it earlier in the, the fall, September, October range, I talked about the inaugural Locked On Top 100, which I was a voter for. I share those rankings in this space, and then I kind of compared it a couple weeks ago to the ESPN rank, which is certainly the most prominent mainstream one, is the ESPN one. I had some qualms both sides. It wasn't, it is what it is. Another one of these that I got questions about, so I'm going to answer this one quickly, is the Sports Illustrated rankings that came out, I think like a few days ago at this point in time. The one that got everybody riled up, and I think me as well, was Trey's ranking. He was number 37 on their list. That is ludicrous, I think. Like, I don't want to over-index on being outraged by things, but Trey being outside the top 30 is kind of silly to me, but being 37 even more so, that's just way, way, way too low and like almost worth ignoring. But he's behind guys like Chet Holmgren, for instance, Bam Adebayo, De'Aaron Fox, Ivica Zubac, who I love, by the way. He's a really underrated, awesome player, but no. Tyrese Maxey. Also, I think Trey is obviously better than Tyrese Maxey. And the one that really got me beyond, I mean, a few of those got me, honestly, but Damian Lillard is ahead of Trey. I don't understand that. Like, even if Dame wasn't hurt and at the age where he's going to almost certainly slow down because of the injury, Trey has been better than Damian Lillard for a few years at this point. So that was a crazy one. Obviously, I think Chet could be better than Trey in the future. He's not now. I would say that for sure. Zubac, same thing, whatever. Trey is at least 10 spots too low on that list, and I will leave it there for now. Elsewhere on that list, by the way, nothing else crazy. Porzingis was too low. He's number 79 on the list. That's at least like understandable given the durability, but if he is on the court, he is obviously better than that. And they did not rank either Alexander Walker or Kongwu. I'd have both guys in the 90s probably for me. Some guys that got ranked ahead of them that I would not have ranked: Stephon Castle, Dylan Brooks, Brandon Pajemski. I think those guys are like not as good as Nikhil and Kongwu personally. So that's just a couple of examples. That's not comprehensive, but anyway, I saw your questions. I got it. The Trey one was crazy enough to where I almost wanted to ignore it, but just to say this out loud, yes, that's crazy ranking. I'm not shocked because I've seen him in that range before on some lists, but if you think Trae Young's the 37th best player in basketball, you're just not watching Trae Young, is what I would say. All right, moving on in a second to some Kevin Pelton projections. People were very mad about these, by the way. We'll get to that in a second, plus a question about the Hawks' 6 to 8 roster spots and the comparison of that kind of grouping on their roster to the rest of the Eastern Conference. We'll get into all that and more in just one moment. The NFL is ongoing right now. FanDuel has an offer that you actually do not want to miss. Right now, if you're a new customer, you bet just $5, you get $300 in bonus bets if you win that first bet at FanDuel. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the FanDuel app. They're great at FanDuel in so many different ways. One reason is that actually fit how you like to bet on sports, whether it's player props, team parlays. They have straight bets, whether it's point spreads or over-unders or money lines, etc. They have future bets, and they even have live betting as the action unfolds for you. It makes watch football all the time more exciting, or basketball, same thing, baseball, etc. We have a little something extra on the action. It's more fun and more exciting for you. They have all the sports that you can think of across the board, from football, the NBA, of course. College basketball is coming up pretty soon. College football is going on right now. Baseball, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. Whether you're a casual fan, just a little bit diving into the stats at FanDuel, they make it better for you in the gaming experience. Just really tremendous across the board. FanDuel is quick, it's easy, and they're fast payout when you win, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to your game days this fall and beyond. So what are you waiting for? The place to go is FanDuel.com. Download the FanDuel app. One more time, it's FanDuel.com, the FanDuel app, and get started today. When you get hurt on the job, you should know what you're entitled to. Attorney John Foy does. Lost wages, medical bills, rehab, therapy. You should be getting all of this and more. The system does not make this easy for you, but they actually do at John Foy Associates. Every day, Attorney John Foy Associates helping people get the money and the benefits they deserve after they've been hurt on the job. When it comes to workers' comp, a place to know what you're actually entitled to. The strong arm can actually help you get proper medical attention, pay off medical bills, and get you on a path to good health again. I love they treat every single client with dignity, compassion, and respect, and they're available 24/7 to take your call at Attorney John Foy Associates. And the best part is, you pay absolutely nothing until John Foy wins your case with no upfront costs. If I get injured on the job, I know exactly who I would call, and it's the strong arm. John Foy Associates is trusted because they have helped thousands of different clients get justice and real money in their pockets. Let the strong arm cut through insurance company nonsense right now and fight to get you every single dollar. Call John Foy Associates today at 404-400-4000. That is 404-400-4000, or visit johnfoy.com to get started. They don't just settle, they win. Get the strong arm. Call Attorney John Foy Associates today. All right, and people are very mad in my mentions and emails and all those things about Kevin Pelton's projections at ESPN. So caveats here, Kevin Pelton is really good at his job. He's been on this podcast before. I like Kevin. We're friendly. We're not close friends, but we're friendly. All that said, it's understandable that people are frustrated by this. I'll say that. It is well below what they, for me, are projected to get. That's 44 wins is what Pelton actually has. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Again, it's too low for me on the Hawks. I'm not in agreement with this. Full caveats apply. I'm now going to explain to you kind of the context around what happened here, I think. For one thing, systems like this, projection systems that are numbers-based and analytics-based, et cetera, tend to bring everything to the middle a little bit, both on the high side and the low side. And that definitely happened here with the Eastern Conference in particular. For example, the Cavs are number 1 in the East, according to Pelton. Now, That's a consensus opinion. Not everyone has the Cavs, but most people do. They're number one in most projections right now. But the thing is, they have Cleveland on these projections by Kevin Pelton at 50.1 wins. I'll say this right now. It would be shocking if the number one seed in the East had 50 wins. That is a lower number than it would ever be, probably. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. It's not. It's possible that this could happen, but very, very unlikely. And he knows this, of course. Someone will win more games than that. But it goes to show how flat, that's the word I will keep using, how flat the Eastern Conference is in this projection and a lot of projections. I've seen other ones that are more proprietary, not posted online. And a lot of these are pretty flat. Like sometimes you see the Cavs kind of in their own tier up there, but the rest of these projections, they're like very, very tightly bunched. And that kind of goes to show how things are. One more stat on this. Number 1 to number 8, the gap on that in the East and these projections is 7.5 wins. There is no chance that number 1 and number 8 is 7.5 wins. And again, Pelton knows that. He did share some methodology, though, and the big one that could have, I think, probably did impact the Hawks is that he projects games played based on the amount of games missed to injury over the past 3 years, which for the Hawks impacts two guys a lot, Jalen Johnson and Porzingis. Now, Porzingis is much more understandable because that's a 10-year record of that. But Jalen Johnson's averaged 54 games a year the last 3 years. If you projected Jalen 54 games only, it would make more sense to be in the 44 win range for the Hawks. Now, I'd still probably go like 45, 46 if you gave me that exactly. Like, hey, Jalen's playing this many games right now. I'm telling you that right now. I would go lower than I have them, which is in the high 40s to 50 range. We'll get to that officially later on next week. But it's understandable now that you would knock them down because if Jalen misses 28 games again, you have to reduce your projection on the Hawks. You just have to. That's part of it because he's very, very important to them. So that does explain some of this to me. They're still too low. And by the way, Pelton even wrote in the piece that released these rankings that he is personally, quote, higher than the model, end quote, on the Hawks. So he knows too. Like, doesn't mean they're going to be right. The Hawks, there is definitely a world where the Hawks won 44 games this year. Like, I understand people are thinking that is not going to happen. I am higher than that too. But there is a world where that happens. Like, regression happens, bad luck happens, injuries happen, whatever. So I'm not going to like bang the table and say there's no ways that could definitely happen. But I will be higher than that. Pelton himself is higher than that. So that's my explanation on why that is. And I will just say the Hawks have gotten really, really, really good buzz all summer, as discussed earlier in this podcast. So it's not worth breaking out too much about one model, especially when the writer of the model does not agree with the projection. So there it is. While we're here, by the way, John Hollinger, friend of the podcast from The Athletic, posted that he actually has the Hawks for 49 wins. That's more like in the line where I have them. He actually has them in a tie for third with the Knicks. So he's a bit lower than the Knicks on the Knicks than I am, but also higher on Orlando than I am. So it is what it is. It is projection season. The last few days of the season, that's what happens here. That's a pretty good respect for the Hawks. By the way, I'll probably say this again later when I do my projection in a few days. The Hawks have not won 49 games in a season in 11 years. Last time they won 49 games in a season was the 2014-15 team, the 61 team. So since they won 60, they have not won more than 48 in any season since then. So 49 may not seem like exciting. I know a lot of fans will be in the 50s. I get that, but not a knock by any means. That's a very good optimistic projection for the Hawks. Last thing on the podcast today, a mailbag question from Mark, who says, do the Hawks have the best number 6 through 8 roster spot in the Eastern Conference? I can't remember us having a bench this good on paper. I would say it's a good question for sure. I think there's some questions that I would say reasonable about the deeper depth of the Hawks, a little bit more. Like people are not always sold on Mo and Veet. I get that. I think Mo is better than people realize that he is, defensively in particular. I think guys like Dante and Bassi are like real like end of roster guys that are fine, for example. But to the question itself, I think the answer actually is yes. After looking at this, I think the Hawks do have the best 6 through 8 in the East. And by the way, just to answer this, like, for me, that's 6 through 8 is whoever's not starting at center, which is probably going to be a Kongwu, I think. So a Kongwu, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Luke Kennard, 6 through 8. I will say this, realistically, I think Richeche, like right now, may not be better than a Kongwu and Nickeil, but he's going to start, I think. So that's why he's not 6 or 8. Like he's probably 5 in the starting lineup or whatever. But anyway, it's kind of still the same thing. So it's a longer question from Mark, but what I chopped down to is like, yeah, 6 through 8. I think the Hawks, for me, I'm saying this all summer long, have 7 starters. I don't think Kennard's a starting level player. I think he's a good rotation player. But they have 7 guys who I think are like starting level guys. The Hawks have 6 guys that I voted in the top 100 for me. And Ricochet is like right in the next tier after that. And could be, by the way, in that level this year if he improves. That's very realistic. So go through the roster of some other teams. Like I won't read them all to you, but like Cleveland's top 4 is great. And they have DeAndre Hunter as well, Max Strus, that's 6. But like Lonzo Ball, question mark, health-wise, Sam Merrill, Dean Wade, they're not as good as Okongwu and Nikhil. They're just not. Orlando would be like Tyus Jones, John Isaac, maybe like Anthony Black or Goga. Good bench players, but not like clear starters like the likes of Okongwu and Alexander Walker are. Philly at full health, maybe, but they're not ever fully healthy, so whatever. Detroit is like Karis LeVert, Isaiah Stewart, probably like Duncan Robinson, Ron Howland, whatever. Like those guys are good, but not as good, I don't think, as Nikhil and Okongwu personally. And New York's like super deep depth is better than the Hawks. But by the way, Malcolm Brogdon retired today, which is interesting. But anyway, beyond that, like it's Mitchell Robinson, Yabusele, and McBride, I think. Like that's number 2 in the East. I think those 3 guys are better than everybody else other than the Hawks, but I would lean to Nikhil, Okongwu, and Kennard. So it's kind of a niche question, I know that. But personally, like I don't think there's a team in the league that has 2 better, not 3, but 2 better bench players than the Hawks do with Nikhil and Okongwu. If you said who has the best 6 and 7 only on the roster in the whole league, I would probably pick the Hawks. Now, OKC has Caruso and Cason Wallace. That's close if Cason Wallace takes a step forward. So that'd be the other option, I think. But like, I think Alexander Walker and Okongwu are both top 100 players coming off the bench. And that is not something that everybody else has. So that's the reason I'm leading into 7 starters all summer long. Like nobody has 7 starters. They just don't. And the Hawks do. So that's a pretty good thing. If they can stay healthy, that's a huge weapon, particularly in the playoffs if they get that far. Let's save that for later, but it can be helpful. All right, before we get out of here, quickly, the Hawks do have a game on Thursday. It's the preseason finale. It's in Atlanta against Houston, a rematch of that game, the first game of the exhibition schedule. Quinn noted at practice on Wednesday that the Hawks have a long rest between now and the opener, which is true. And also, I will note, the top guys did not play on Monday. So I am expecting something at least approaching a dress rehearsal on Thursday. Like, I don't think anybody's going to play full minutes, like 35 minutes, but it projects to be something close to what we'll see in the regular season, at least for most of the game, which I'm intrigued by after seeing a basically total throwaway game on Monday. Obviously, I'm intrigued by the bench guys and how they looked, but like they did not treat that game like it mattered. They sat literally 9 of the top 10 guys on the roster. So this will be the opposite of that. I think you'll see a lot more guys playing, and I'll be in the building for that game, and there'll be a new episode on the podcast on Thursday evening. Also, a PSA, that game's on ESPN2 and not on FanDuel Sports Network. So be prepared for that. If you are a local person not used to watching ESPN2, ESPN2 only for that game. And by the way, it's the only national game on Thursday. So a little bit of a spotlight for the Hawks against the Rockets. With that said, it's time to sign off now. Please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. I'm also on Blue Sky at BT Rowland. You can follow my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right, everybody, I'll be back in about 24 hours after the Hawks take on the Rockets on Thursday, and we'll see you all next time.